Hello and welcome to this live session. My name is Ashley Lloyd. I'll be hosting the session today. And today's topic is writing for business. Now, this session is loosely based around Unit 304 within the Leadership and Management Specification Framework, although it is based around communication, so it may help with any units associated with communication in the workplace. So the main aim of this session today is just to talk you through different communication methods and help you to develop writing skills that are suitable for business in order to be able to complete your assignments on writing for business. Okay, so basically, leaders and managers are expected to communicate well, in business. It's just the way it is. Usually people that get promoted and go up the chain of command are people with good communication and interpersonal skills. So they're expected to communicate well, and whether that's in writing or face to face, managers that communicate well perform well, and so do the team usually because they've got that link to communication and everyone knows what they want to do. Well, I'm just going to start off with talking to you about some basic definitions. So one definition of effective communication provided by Hamilton in 2011 was relating to effective communication. So effective communication is when a message is received as the sender intended. Now think about the wording in that. You've got the receiver, you've got, the communicator or the sender, and that information that's intended to get across does so effectively. There's also another definition, which is communicate is to transmit or pass on by speaking or writing, which is a lot more basic. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as the act of important, especially news. But I think the first definition that I provided, the point to note in that definition was the word effective. It's not what A says or writes, but what B understands. So think about it from what I've just said then in relation to the receiver and the sender of information. The sender will be A and the receiver will be B. So, it does matter in order for the information to be effective that the sender is passing on that information and the receiver, which could be B, understands it as it was intended to be sent. Now, I know that can be a little bit confusing when you think about it that way, but it might be easier to think about it as A or B or sender or receiver. But we'll talk about the sender and receiver in a little bit more detail and see if that makes a little bit more sense. So writing for business, how can we define that? Good writing skills and good standardized focus and professional layout can lead to good satisfaction, your company to be looked at in a professional manner, but it's important to be able to have your brand, your logo, your the way that your organization is should be portrayed through your business writing, and whether that's more laid back and chilled out and relaxed, or whether it's more formal, then that should be portrayed in the business writing. So it's a type of written communication, usually with a standard structure or style, and it addresses the needs of a specific audiences and has a specific purpose as well. So before beginning to explore the vital elements of communication, which give an understanding of the message, consideration should be applied to the types of communication within business as well. So let's consider them. Let's consider the different types of communication. So a lot of people just think, written communication is just a letter, or, but it's more to it than that when you think about it in a business sense. You know, you have got letters that are, sent internally, externally within the company. An internal letter could be a case for, someone might have received a letter of dismissal, or disciplinary action, or letters of redundancy, so internally, letters can be sent. And then externally, they could be sent to customers, or, they could be sent to key stakeholders. So anyone who has a stake in the company, or things like invoices would be seen as business written communication. Then you've got records of meetings, one-to-one reviews, appraisals, which can be seen as verbal communication, but obviously there needs to be a record of that verbal communication in that person's human resource file, so or staff file. So that's where they're usually go. And it's important as well when we're talking about where they go with this written communication, the level of confidentiality for each of these different forms of communication and written documents. Think about the confidentiality, think about who can access them, think about data protection as well. It's really important that, especially with things like emails, or, that even staff human resource files such as performance reviews, or they might have personal improvement plans because they're not performing well. We don't need everybody in the whole company to see that. It might just be the line manager and the human resource team or the ops team. Excuse me. So yeah, the level of authority that people need to actually access the written communication is also important to consider, and the confidentiality, and basically the level of understanding. You might not be seeing everybody write annual accounts. That might just be the accountant within the company, or it might just be, one of the higher level senior managers that are writing them. You wouldn't be expected to have someone who's new starter to the company to write annual annual accounts, or say marketing plans, for example. People need to be trained in specific written communication. So it's important to consider that, that there's more written communication. Here's just a few examples. Now, thinking about verbal communication, there's a couple of different types of verbal communication. Telephone is probably the most commonly used verbal communication, but you've also got, presentations, health and safety briefs, or monthly meetings, or, there's a number of different, even informal conversations and chats can be vital to any organisation. The video conferencing, or, working through Teams if you're working remotely. So there's a number of different types of verbal communication. Now, if the written or the verbal communication is used ineffectively, the message that you've intended to pass over to that sender is not being delivered as you wanted it to, then there are consequences of that ineffective communication, and it's really important to consider the consequences. I've noted down here, as a manager, you can encounter issues relating to miscommunication, and then issues can spiral out of control. There might be somebody who's working remotely, for example, who isn't getting past the same information as somebody else on the team that's working in the office. And they might find that they feel like they're being discriminated against because of something in particular. And then it could just all be, looked at and found out that the root cause of the problem was just that there was ineffective communication within that team. So it's important to be able to see the importance. Different communication channels and methods will be more effective than others in different situations. So it's important to consider the communication channel as well, and whether that is effective. But let's just have a little look at some ideas. of basically the fallout from ineffective communication. So stakeholders, whether that be internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, customers to the company, if they're ill-informed, it can impair their decision making. It can affect the relationships between the company. It could, lose your contracts. So, for example, if you've got, in the past, we've had, IT support for a customer relationship management system that we had in an old workplace that I worked. And we had, that support was meant to be there, 20 hours a day. And we could never get through to them on the phone when the systems broke down in any way. So we ended up going and finding a new IT support team, and we ended up taking them on board, and they lost out on quite a lot of business because it was a big company at the time. So it's really important to be able to consider that, if there's ineffective communication between any sort of stakeholders, so anyone who's got a stake in the company, then it can affect contracts. People won't want to work with people that aren't communicating with you well. And that even could bring you straight back to stakeholder analysis and reviewing the importance of the level of communication that you need with a specific stakeholder. Some people might need to be completely in the know and you need to update them daily on what's going on, and some people might just need to know monthly, or some people just might need to know that they're getting paid on time. So there's a number of different communication channels that can be used with stakeholders, and finding out what their preference is sometimes useful as well. And you can do that in a meeting, or one of the initial meetings when you're, putting together that contract. Mistakes and errors are, probably one of the most common problems of miscommunication. People delaying, targets being met due to mistakes and errors because communication hasn't been stable properly. So that can lead to customers becoming dissatisfied. Customers become dissatisfied, you lose custom, you lose return of investment, your company will start to suffer. So it just goes to show how important communication is within the organisation in writing and, verbally as well. Motivation, productivity decreases due to, lack of communication and inadequate quality in products. But bringing back to motivation, I believe that communication is probably one of the most important things that a company, communication is the most important aspect of an organisation and an effective team. And the reason being is, some people believe that just knowing what they need to know for their department is useful. And it is, just needing to know, but it could lead you to tunnel vision. Now, a lot of people within companies, and I've said this before in live sessions, aren't aware of what their organisational vision is, aren't aware of what the goals are, basically why they're doing what they're doing. They don't really understand how their objectives link to the goal, link to the strategy and the organisation's vision. And if they did, would they be more motivated to get their job done because they know that they're heading towards somewhere, that they're, playing a big part in the company reaching that vision for where they'd like to be in, say, 5 years' time or whatever. And if so, and everyone was aware of it and everyone was, fully aware of their role and how they play in their company being productive, would they do better? And, from what I see from experience, the answer is yes. Most organisations that have a clear and effective communication strategy within the teams, and everyone knows exactly what their purpose is in their role and achieving the goals and, the objectives of the organisation and how they can, make things work and make the company more efficient and effective. Them companies are the ones that are the most successful in my eyes and through experience. So you might think of other, different types of consequences, and there's actually loads, to be fair. Thinking about even within a team can cause conflict, or it can cause conflict between departments if communication isn't managed well. It can increase negativity And that could lead to a blame culture within the organisation. Well, this person didn't tell me this, and that's why I've done that wrong. And this person didn't pass me this information. And I've only just found out about this now when everybody else found out about it last week. People will use these sort of excuses, but realistically, are the excuses if they're not being told the information in writing or verbally in the right amount of time to allow them to prepare to how to respond to that, then is it their fault if their response isn't good enough for the management team, for example? Think about that. So let's move on to the communication cycle. Now, this is Michael Argyle's communication cycle, and it was developed in 1967, so quite a while ago now, but still relevant today. And what it does, it sets out a process of communication in 6 steps. So when it thinks about, aim, that's the construction of the idea of the communication to be sent. And then the second one looks at the message coded, and that involves putting an idea into an understandable format, such as pictures or language or writing, but for that intended audience, so that the intended audience can understand. So, for an example, if you had a data analysis team and they've been analysing the sales trends, for example, the sales team might not understand when they're delivering it to them how well they've done by a load of numbers. You might want to put that in a pie chart or a bar chart format to be able to allow that audience to understand how well they've done in this year, or how well they've done in that year, or per quarter, or whatever, so that's important as well. So making sure that it's in an understandable format and the best format for it to be delivered to that audience. Looking at the send deliver message as well, that's another way, transmitting the message to the person that you're going to be delivering it to. So how are you going to transmit it? If you are delivering a PowerPoint presentation to 50 people, you need to make sure that the room and the material that you've got, or the screen is big enough that you can portray, use your voice to every single person in the room can hear you. Things like that need to be considered at this point. And then the message decoded is where the receiver or the recipient must now decode the message. So this is probably the most common stage for the breakdown of communication, and it's because that the message is not being translated as it's intended to be. So again, moving back to how you're going to transmit that information is important here. And then the message is understood, and the person, or the receivers of that information, or the receiver understands what you can communicate, and then the cycle can be repeated as well. So I think the communication cycle is one to look at, because you're carefully considering how that information is going to be communicated and in what modes. So yeah, have a little think about that before you do send information. Another technique when looking at what communication you're going to be sending is the 7 C's of communication checklist. And this is a really good method to use, because you're just breaking down how you're delivering that communication again. So firstly, thinking about how clear it is. Excuse me. So how clear is speaking or writing? Consider the message or the main aim of the communication. What is the purpose of the communication to this specific individual or group of people? And if you're not sure, then the audience probably won't be sure, so be clear. Stick to the main aim of the communication, be concise and to the point. Don't waste time when writing. Don't use like filler words such as basically or for instance. And if you're delivering a presentation, try and keep it short, because people lose interest as well, and they just want the information to be passed on to them as quickly as possible so they can get on with the day-to-day, or they can problem solve, or whatever they're doing at that time. So the concrete essentially means there is a clear picture formed from the communication delivered. So it's clear, people can see exactly what it's about. And then you're looking at the correct communication is error-free and valid as well. Making sure, I've been in a meeting in the past and somebody tries to give me information, and I knew that the information that they were giving me weren't right. It weren't up to date. They were giving me information from the week before. And I was just thinking, well, I've completely lost interest in everything else what you're saying now, because that first initial number, what you've just given me, is incorrect, and I know it's incorrect. So making sure that information is up to date, valid, even check for spelling and grammar. And when speaking, your pronunciation's important as well. I know that can be difficult with a strong accent like yourself, or difficult if, for example, maybe you're a doctor and you happen to pronounce long medication or diagnosis for somebody. But think about it from a patient's point of view. If you're diagnosed with something and the doctor can't pronounce that diagnosis to you, you probably lose a bit of interest in what they're saying, because you're going to be thinking, why can't they tell me exactly what this is? So yeah, providing complete information links as well to, hearing the full information, to be able to take action as well. Getting the full information, being able to take action or complete tasks that are set for you. And the 7 point, courteous communication is about being honest, friendly, approachable, respectful to the people that you're, that you're providing information to. So performance review is like a fitting example, really. You've got to be empathetic and respectful to that person. Don't come down on them like a ton of bricks when you don't really even understand why the performance is flagging. It could be something really serious is going on at home that you need to find out about. Also, this 7 communication checklist can be adapted a little bit. Some people like to, there's a few variations really. Some people add credible, and this is especially important when delivering information to a brand new audience. So it's them having confidence in what you're giving, you showing that you are credible to deliver that information that they're going to be receiving. And then creative, thinking about, does your message communicate creatively? This is even more prominent today, especially with like Zoom and Teams and stuff. It's encouraging your team to consider creative ways to make sure that people will stay interactive within that presentation. So do we communicate in the best possible way we can? If we don't think we do, can we use a checklist? Maybe. Now, let's have a little look now. We're just going to take a step back at the advantages of written communication, because that's what this assignment is about. It is about business writing, and it's about you being able to provide evidence that you can, write for business. So the advantages are, think about, it can be held permanently, according to data protection principles, obviously. It can be carefully thought out before release. So like you could check and check it again, get somebody else to check it if it's a really formal document. It can be stored easily. Well, usually it can. Some people say that keeping it out in the cloud or keeping it, on a computer is easier. Or storing a hard copy of something, some people might say is safer. But also you've got to think about confidentiality as well. And I used to work for a legal firm a long time ago, and they used to have a storage unit that they paid quite a lot for to keep all of their legal documents stored. So it might be that a cost comes with it as well. So you can look at it, the two sides of the coin of this. It can be sent out to multiple people in different places. A signed document tends to have more validity than oral communication and can be seen as more formal as well. And it can be helpful during audit trials like financial accounting or quality assurance, things like that. Disadvantages: it can take time, it can cost money to print, it can cost money to send out. And people who cannot read and write will struggle to understand the information as well. So there's a number of advantages and advantages, and it does, it's important to be able to point them out as well. So moving on to writing conventions, it's important and it is essential to think about these things before sending any written documents out for, a recognised organisation. Think about the standards of delivery. Think about, getting people to proofread your important documents, especially if you're quite new to it and you're not doing it all the time. Now, a number of organisations will have their own writing conventions and will have their own templates for specific things. For example, if you've passed a qualification with ourselves, we do have a standardised template that we will send out along with the certificates. Obviously, it is adapted and changed to suit your qualification, and sometimes the tutor likes to add an additional paragraph in there to you, but it is a standardised template. We use templates like that to save time, but to also ensure that there's a standards of writing that's being sent out as well. These are obvious things that people get mixed up with. But just remember, if you're thinking, I don't know what I'm reading, how about you? Do you think she knows what she's reading within, meaning the reader or the writer? Then always consider that grammar and punctuation, and spelling. One thing that frustrates me is, a lot of spell checking is the American form of spell checking. So a lot of people are writing in an American tone when they're from England. So it's important to be able to check things like that as well. Also, there's software that you can use on computers, like Grammarly, for example, and that's an American tone as well. So if that can't be changed, these are important things to consider, especially when you're writing a formal document. Okay, let's look at advantages of oral communication. So you've got instant feedback, there's a flow to the conversation, it can be relatively simple. Although it's time efficient, sometimes to actually talk to a person over the phone can, it can go on and on, especially if you have a bit of small talk first before you get to the point of, that's an important point. But it allows for mistakes to be immediately corrected. So, if I was to say, this is important because of X, Y, and Z, and it was wrong, I could say, oh, hang on, sorry, it's important because of this, essentially. And you could change it literally straight away. So it's important to think about that. It can be inexpensive as well. So, for example, if you were to travel to a meeting, you could maybe have a Zoom call or, a normal telephone call, and that would eliminate cost. And you could also think of the environmental factors as well. If you're going to be printing out documents all the time, it's not really good for the environment, and the use of resources could be lowered if you weren't doing that. Think about probably the amount of money that banks have saved through internet banking. Although, important documents like mortgage documents still get sent out in the post. So think about that formality as well. So the disadvantages of oral communication, open to misunderstanding, especially over the phone as well, when you can't see, people talking to you and smiling when they're talking to you, things can be misinterpreted, and the tone of your language can sometimes be misinterpreted, especially when you're from different cultures as well. And I've seen that a lot in when I worked in China, because the tone of their language is portrayed by the words that they say. So a certain word can be used 3 different ways and be interpreted 3 different ways. But by somebody who's English, just hearing one of them words, they might, misinterpret that information. Whereas if I was to say hello, or I was to say hello, or, the tone in which I talk can instantly be recognizable to somebody about the way I'm feeling, if you understand. So it can be seen as a disadvantage, but it could also be seen as an advantage if you consider the tone as well. So always remember when writing a letter, the structure, if you need to keep your logo, or, the format of each of your letters should be the same and standardized. That logo should be portrayed in a way that is easily identifiable by your organization. And if you're not putting any images on any documents, you want to make sure that everybody can read them. They're not too small, they're not too big, making sure that that portrayed in the right way. If they're blurry, that's not really good for the reader. Is that information going to be misunderstood because they can't exactly see, say, like the percentage on a pie chart, for example? And then again, the tone, although the tone can be easily portrayed orally, there can be a tone to writing as well. So it's important to think, is it going to be formal? Is it going to be informal? How am I wording? Am I wording things? If you're saying to whom this may concern, yours sincerely, it might be portrayed different than dear sir, madam, and then yours faithfully at the end of a letter. So there's small things like that you could maybe change and adapt. Even the fact of on your emails, having a standardized signature on your email shows professionalism. Whether you have, kind regards, or many thanks, or yours sincerely on yours. Yeah, I mean, people keep it the same all the time. I change mine depending on who I'm speaking to. But how you sign off from an email is quite important as well. And people don't really get taught that much in business. People go straight from college to an organization and don't really get taught too much about email writing. And I think it's something that people should get taught, if they haven't been taught in college or university or school, because the tone and the language that you use within an email can really affect communication and relationships within the workplace. So, that's quite important as well. Level of formality, as I've just mentioned, depends on what industry or company that you work for, your relationship between people that you're communicating with, whether it's the customers, the key stakeholders, the CEO of the company, might depend on the level of formality that you have within that business, right? And then the layout conventions, so that could be something as simple as, if you're writing a letter, where to put the address, what you're going to write in there, whether you need to add a customer number or, the date to that. So there's a number of things to consider when looking at the house structure and standardization. And it's important that if you aren't fully aware of that structure, then you ask the questions that you need to. And that this could be said about reports as well. So, for example, years ago, I was standing in for a manager, and I was asked to put together a plan, like a project plan. I'd never done one before, so I, started Googling how to do, a project plan, how to, look at what sequence to do it. And I didn't ask if there was a standard project plan template for that actual organisation when I was working there. And it took me a lot of time and research to figure that out. And then when I found it out, and I was like delivering the plan to the team, they would ask me why I weren't using their plan templates, and nobody told me that there was a plan there. So I've created my own. Is this okay? It had the deliverables, the goal. It had, actionable objectives on there, and what the hopeful outcome was, and risks and stuff. So it had all the information that was relative for the plan to be effective, but it just went to their standard. So I did feel like I weren't sure whether they wanted me to put it onto that template or not. But they do keep hold of all of the plans, so I felt like I needed to just copy and paste everything onto their plan and then keep it in their format. So if you don't know whether there is a standard structure, there, ask. It's always worth asking. Okay, so how do we ensure effective and appropriate writing? Now, talking about what we just spoke about, like the tone, the structure, the language, the formality, it's important that you understand that misunderstandings do happen all the time. People from all different backgrounds that come together to work together. You know, especially when you think about global, organizations working globally. Um, People are from different cultures. The people just miss time difference can have an effect on communication as well. So usually due to the participants not being on the same wavelength or working together or understanding how people communicate, it can be often miscommunicated or seen in a different way. So it's important to understand that misunderstandings can happen and sometimes be able to say, okay, this has happened, or hold your hands up, I'm sorry, I forgot to pass that information to you because I was rushing out the office because one of my dog had to go to the vet, or something like that. So know your audience is a really good point. Their vocabulary, the style and the tone, and make sure that you're put together your communication to adapt to them. At the end of the day, they're the people that you want to understand. So if you think that you'll be able to deliver it better in a meeting rather than just providing them with a PowerPoint or a report, then have a meeting, talk through that report with them people. Like I said, use standardized templates where possible. Use formatting wisely, such as subheadings, paragraphs. You might want to put borders around important bits of information, or bold that bit of information, or change the colour if it's that important. Often is the case with formal documents. If there's, say, like a letter of notice for a final notice, you might see that the writing is in red, because I think people see the red instantly and just say, well, that's the most important bit of the letter, and it usually is. Proofread thoroughly. Ask people to proofread as well. Ask people to check for errors. Ask people to tell you if they understand what the main point of that communication is. Because, like a report, for example, if you're doing a report on, say, like Moodle, for example, if I was to do a report on Moodle and send it out to everybody in the company, although a lot of people don't analyze the statistics on Moodle, every single person within the company, even the learners, should be able to understand what the main aim and what the key point in that report is, or what the main objectives of that report is. So it should be easily readable by anybody. Avoid jargon, stick to key facts, and make sure that your information is valid and reliable as well. So they're just some key points. Now, within this assignment, learning outcome 1.3 asks you for evidence, detailing writing for a business, making sure that you're pointing out the tone, the language, and the formality. So it's really, really, really important that you provide evidence of some sort of written communication that you've done within the workplace, but you've pointed out why that tone is important, what the language is, portraying, and the level of formality of that specific document. 1.4 also asks you to add an appendix with stats or a diagram. Now, the best way to do this and approach this assignment is to think about developing a report and writing a summary, just to give a little bit of an extent of the company and the scope of the report, so what you want to achieve, the purpose and how you're going to achieve it, the intended audience as well, and the intended outcome or defined objective or goal, the main aim of it. So the main aim could be a report. It could be a report on attendance within the team within the last year. And you could be just analysing some stats, creating a diagram to for people to be able to visualize the statistics instead of looking straight into them, so you can be able to see any sort of variances or any sort of trends within that. So you can add them as well, add that sort of stuff for 1.4. If you do have any problems or struggles writing this summary, just contact me and I'll give you some advice and support on that. So writing the report itself, always good to provide a summary or introduction. Some people call it, yeah, just think about it as a brief summary to why you're doing it, and then an introduction to your report. Then you've got your content page, your findings in the main body, conclusions and recommendations, and any appendix such as statistics or diagrams as well. So yeah, the main point, as I said, to consider is you do need to complete a report as part of this. That is your form of business writing. Your report can be on anything, really. And there is only one learning outcome to this, to Unit 304, if that's what you are reviewing this video for. And just make sure that when you're looking at 1.3, that you're thinking about the tone, language, and formality to meet the specific standards. So if the reporting related to, health and safety in relation to standards, then you can link it back to them standards as well. So that concludes my session today. I hope that I have helped you think about communication channels, and the effectiveness of different communication methods and ways to improve the way that communication is delivered. I also hope that if you are completing Unit 304 or any of the communication related units within our assignments, that this has been useful to you. If you do have any further questions relating to this session or the unit that you're working on, you can contact me. But for now, that's me, and I will see you next week for managing work analysis. Have a good day.